Do you ever wonder what is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number? The traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community. A community not part of the mainstream, unconventional, peripheral, or extreme. Part of an anthology, a published collection of poems or other pieces of writing. This is Esoteric Lore. I'm your host, Edward Aponte, where I push you to ponder the fringes of folklore. Since the 19th century, when the first pagan settlers arrived in Iceland, there have been celebrations at the time of the winter solstice. The original pagan word for this period was Yule, which is the Icelandic word still used today for Christmas. There are various speculations as to the origin of Yule in English. One is that it is linked to Yulnir, one of the aliases for Odin, father of the heathen Norse gods. Another is that it is related to the English word jolly. Well, jolly the celebrations certainly were. In fact, the first mention of the word that we can find in Icelandic literature is in reference to a drinking Yule. Icelandic farmers would throw great banquets at this time of the year in order to alleviate the monotony of the dark, frozen winters. The 11th century saw the introduction of Christianity. And as this new religion slowly took hold, the Yuletide celebration were gradually absorbed into the Christian tradition. But the jolly times carried on unabated until Reformation laws in the 16th century decreed that, quote, all disorderly and scandalous entertainment at Christmas and other times and Shrovetide revels are strongly forbidden on pain of serious punishment, end quote. However, these threats did little to dampen the people's spirit, and the revelry continued. There's a story that at Hruni, in the south of Iceland, a whole church with all its partying congregation was sucked down into the bowels of hell as punishment for their misdeeds. This Puritanism was to last for 3 centuries until the middle of the 19th century saw a slow relaxation in the authorities' attitudes and a return to exuberant celebrations. The harshness of the winters and the poor and simple living conditions of the Icelanders over the centuries did not hinder the development of a fine literary imagination. As a result, Icelandic folktales are richly endowed with ogres, elemental beings, monsters, and their like. The most loathsome and hideous ogre is the giant troll Grilla. She first appeared in a 13th century manuscript, has made regular appearances since then, and is now an infamous figure familiar to all Icelandic children. There have been many different descriptions given of her over the years, each one more horrible than the last. As mothers to the Yule lads, Grilla plays an important part in Icelandic Christmas tradition. Apart from looking hideous, she has, it seems, a real craving for stewed child. Not just any old child, though. It has to be a naughty, lazy, or rude one. Over the years, she's become quite handy to parents as a threat and was regularly used as a warning to badly behaved children. Grilla sets off as Christmas approaches, a sack over her shoulder, ravenous for naughty boys and girls. Whether she'll enjoy a feast or go hungry will depend on how good the little one's behavior has been over the past year. One story has her dying of starvation because the children have behaved so well, but she is born again, at least in stories, each and every Christmas, and will no doubt continue to be for many centuries to come. Over the many centuries of Grilla's existence, she has had any number of romantic alliances, including an affair with Lucifer, but only 3 permanent relationships have been recorded. Her first spouse was known as Boli. Grilla, it is said, had many children with him. He lived to a ripe old age, and since he was a troll, this means we're talking thousands of years. He was bedridden long before he eventually expired. About the second, very little's known. All we can be sure of is that his name was Guster, and that when he died, Grilla ate him. The third is the most famous, the father of the Yule lads. He is still around, turns up every Christmas, and goes by the name of Lepalu Oi. He is almost amiable compared to Grilla, but shares with his spouse a liking for stewed child. A lazy, slobbish, uncouth layabout, he allows Grilla to do all the scavenging for wayward children while he puts his feet up and keeps the pot bubbling in anticipation of her return. Grilla overshadows her spouses to such an extent that hardly any descriptions of them exist. All we can be sure of is that they were giant troll-like creatures and not very easy on the eye. The mother of the Yule lads, Grilla, was not one for letting the grass grow under her hooves, and there are over 80 recorded offsprings attributed to this lady. Whereas the character of the malicious, grumpy Grilla has changed little over the centuries, the nature of Yule lads has undergone quite a transformation. When first mentioned in the 17th century, they were described as evil ogres, like their parents, and were used for threatening or motivating lazy children. So much so that the authorities in 1746 felt it necessary to issue the following decree. Quote, "The foolish custom which has been practiced here and there about the country of scaring children with Yuletide lads or ghosts shall be abolished." End quote. The 19th century saw them reduced to the 13 rascally petty pilferers that are recognized today. Their act has softened up considerably, and they may have even stopped eating children altogether. In 1932, a small book of charming verses by Johannes Kotlum was published called Yuletide is Coming. The verses told the story of Grilla and her family and were an instant success, remaining popular to this day. With the accompanying illustrations, they have gone a long way towards establishing the appearance and character of the Icelandic Yule family as we know them today. With their traditional shabby farm clothes and beards of various shades and sizes, the brothers have largely managed to fight off the foreign influence of chubby, jovial Santa. However, during the course of the last century, and much of to the delight of children, the Yule lads took up the custom of leaving small gifts. Obviously, Mr. Claus must take some credit for this trend. Instead of stockings on bedposts, Icelandic children leave shoes on their windowsills. One wonders, what is it with Christmas gifts and footwear? Each of the Yule lads sets off from the family home in the Highlands and travels on foot over the mountains, making their individual appearances one after the other on the 13 nights before Christmas. Like Santa, they manage to cover the whole country, as well as delivering gifts to all the Icelandic children living abroad. In a single night, no wonder they are hungry. The first to arrive in city, town, and farmhouse is the sheep warrior. His chief characteristic is a gangly walk due to the stiffness of his legs. He is probably one of the oldest brothers and may suffer from a touch of rheumatism. He gets his name from his old habit of sneaking into the sheep cot, where, feeling rather thirsty after his long trek from the mountains, he would try to suckle from the sheep, but failed because he was too stiff to bend down. Now, it's doubtful whether the sheep would yield any milk in the middle of December, which suggests his IQ could be somewhat less than 3 figures. Fortunately, in modern townhouses these days, there's no bending required, and he is quite happy to help himself to a glass of milk from the fridge. The sheep warrior, like his brothers, leaves a small toy, a piece of fruit or something a little more sugary for each child's shoe, unless the child has been naughty, in which case all he or she receives is a potato. Second on the list of benevolent hitmen, another thirsty lad, the gully gawk. In days gone by, this decidedly elusive character would travel under the cover of deep gullies and dark ravines until he reached a farmhouse. There he would sneak stealthily into the animal quarters and seclude himself until the milkmaid was distracted. Then he'd pounce upon the milk pail, first savoring the creamy froth on top, his favorite treat, before quenching his thirst with the fresh, warm milk. These days he has no taste for the skimmed milks and sterilized stuff that we find in modern kitchens, but it is a case of make do or do without. The runt of the litter, or Stubby, is the third to arrive, though he is actually the first to set off. His little legs are so short and the snow is so deep that it takes him considerably more time and effort than his brothers to travel over the mountains. He is rather sensitive about his height, or lack of it, as it is a cruel fate to be the shortest member of a family of trolls. You may not catch a glimpse of him on this particular night, as his size makes him adept at hiding. But the appearance of gifts the following morning is proof that he has been there. He's another of the scroungers and hangs around the kitchen to scrape whatever he can off pans that the occupants, for whatever reason, haven't managed to get around to washing. While the rich are said to be born with a silver spoon in their mouth, this character definitely got the wooden spoon. His lot in life is to loiter around dark kitchens waiting for spoons to be set aside so that he can grab them and scurry back to his hiding place to enjoy them in peace. Anyone who has done any baking with children around will realized that the wooden spoon doesn't stay sticky for long. The spoon licker is a handy character to dump the blame on. But on 15th of December, do him a favor and don't wash up the spoons, as he is awfully grateful for any sticky spoon connected morsel that will help nourish his emaciated frame. It's a good job these lads arrive at daily intervals, otherwise they would be a calamitous free-for-all as they each head straight for the kitchen, suggesting that Icelanders might not be that prompt at doing the washing up. This suits the pot licker, as his preference is for licking the leftovers off the sides and bottoms of pans, and especially for nibbling at the crunchy, hardened bits that collect around the rim. However, if he does come across a partly full pot, he won't hesitate to gorge himself greedily until he is stuffed. The bowl licker is the last of the lickers. His personal liking is for a traditional wooden bowl known as ashker, with a hinged lid. In the old turf houses, members of the household would each have their own personal ashker, wooden bowl. The lid helped to keep the food warm and presumably protected from any household pets. But it was no protection against the bowl licker. He would hide under a bed, the bedroom doubling as a dining room in the small turf houses, waiting for the time when the dishes were set aside on the floor. Then, when the owners were distracted, he would sneakily snatch the dishes and lick them clean. How he manages these days when the old-style ashker sits unused in museums is not recorded. The door slammer is a frustrated percussionist, loud and boisterous. He likes to creep in under cover of darkness, as quiet as a mouse, and then bang a door as loudly as he can, just for the fun of it. He often rushes from door to door, slamming each in turn, pausing only to enjoy the squeaks and creaks of old, unoiled hinges. This, as you can imagine, is not altogether welcome when he arrives in the middle of the night and awakes the whole household. He is one of only two brothers who are not totally obsessed with their stomachs. First, it should be explained that skyr is a dairy product similar to yogurt but made from separated milk. In the past, it consisted of straightforward curds, but these days it's available in various tasty fruit flavors. In general, skyr glutton, or yogurt glutton, has had a better time of it than most of his brothers, as there is almost always plenty of yogurt to be found in farmhouses in the past, and in these days most household fridges will contain a pot or two of strawberry, peach, or some other delicious yogurt concoction. The yogurt glutton is renowned for being a glutton and will stuff himself until he is bursting at the seams. In olden times, large sausages approximately 6 times the size of a hot dog were hung in strings from the rafters, out of the reach of cats, dogs, and children. Although the sausage stealer is advanced in years, he is still nimble enough to climb stealthily up to the highest rafters. But these days, the chances are as slim as himself of finding any food hanging up there. He is more likely to find what he's looking for vacuum packed in the fridge. Large sausages are still available in shops, but the popular American hot dog is rapidly taking their place. Who knows, in the years to come, the sausage stealer might even be rechristened the hot dog thief. The peeper, as tradition has it, is a very shifty character. He loiters around windows, peeping in when nobody is about. He is always on the lookout for little knickknacks that can be pilfered later on when everybody is tucked up in bed, fast asleep. If a child catches him looking in, the window peeper has a reputation for pulling funny faces to make himself look scary. This Yule lad believes that fair exchange is no robbery, and as always, he leaves presents and shoes he considers a little pilfering perfectly acceptable. You can be sure he often gets the blame for any small objects that go missing at this time of year. For centuries, window peeping wasn't a problem, but with the advent of multi-story apartment blocks, the window peeper has had to adapt to binoculars. From far away over the mountains, the door sniffer gets his first whiff of the sweet-smelling leaf bread being cooked. Even with his eyes closed, he is guided by his highly developed sense of smell towards kitchen doors, behind which Christmas delicacies are being prepared. Flour, until fairly recent times, was very much a luxury commodity in Iceland, and baking was kept for special occasions such as Christmas. Once he has sniffed his way to a kitchen, the door sniffer's genetic makeup means he is a compulsive cake thief. And when the opportunity arises, he never fails to take advantage. In the past, the 22nd of December was known as Looking Forward Day, because it was around this day that children started to anticipate the arrival of Christmas. The penultimate Yule lad is most definitely a carnivore. Meat is what he likes, any sort, and lots of it. It was the simplest of exertions in days gone by to climb up on the roof of an old turf house. There, with the aid of a long, stout hook, the meat hook would reach down the chimney and snag hold of a leg of smoked mutton or any other meat that might be hanging from the rafters. Or he might have reached further down. No doubt he had and still has lots of implements for different situations to hook a morsel from a pot cooking on the hearth. It was customary in the olden days to eat smoked lamb on the 23rd of December. However, these days, possibly to foil the meat hook, a tradition from the west of Iceland has become more generally accepted, that of eating skate on this day. The large flat fish is hung for quite some time until gamey, which means it has a most unappetizing odor. This dish is decidedly an acquired taste. Quite what Meat Hook thinks of the new development, nobody knows. The tradition of giving lavish gifts at Christmas is a relatively recent one. However, the giving of candles on the 24th of December stretches back for centuries, a fact which the last of the Yule lads is well aware of. Before the advent of electricity, children used the candles to brighten up the darkness in celebration of Christmas. But the hungry candle beggar would have devoured any he would lay his hands on. In those days, the candles were made of tallow, animal fat, which, while not exactly delicious, was at least edible and would have helped the wiry Yule lad keep warm on his long journey back to the mountains. These days, the candle beggar is still an avid collector of candles, but he has to satisfy his nutritional needs by other means. The candles still have a significant role to play at Christmas time in Iceland, especially since the relatively recent introduction of the North European Advent crown. One candle is lit on each of the 4 Sundays preceding Christmas, as if Grilla and all her mischievous offsprings were not enough. The poor Icelandic children have to contend with the Yule cat as well, a grossly overgrown house cat turned feral. It is cold, mean, and ravenous. Instead of hunting mice like normalized feline, it preys upon children. But not just any children. The Yule cat is quite discerning, choosing only those who haven't recently been given something new to wear. It skulls across the frigid winter landscape, its yellowy green eyes glowing in the dark. Its teeth are sharp and its claws drawn ready to pounce on any poor, unsuspecting children whose uncaring parents have failed to provide them with a fresh item of clothing for Christmas. Nobody knows where it comes from or where it goes, but on Christmas Eve, when the candles were lit, the Yule cat would peer in through the window. If it saw each child of the household clutching a parcel containing something to wear, it would hiss and scowl and continue on his evil way. Keeping warm in the Icelandic winter was and still is the number one priority. Children in the not so distant past were called upon to help with the preparation and production of new garments. The spinning, weaving, knitting, and sewing were performed to some extent by children until fairly recently in Iceland. All clothing came direct from the sheep. The wool had to be washed, combed, and spun before it was painstakingly crafted into a garment. It was a long, arduous process to make sure the children worked hard and concentrated while they all huddled around the light of a meager flame. Adults would put the fear of God into them with horrific tales of the Yule cat. One wonders whether a similar ploy would produce results today with homework. These days, every good Icelandic parent still makes sure that at the very least there is a new pair of socks or gloves for the kids at Christmas time, just in case, because on dark, long, windy winter nights, a faint, sinister cat howling can sometimes still be heard. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, and give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.